The franchise tag deadline has come and gone. The Seahawks not choosing to use theirs on Ken Walker III, but another team using theirs on a running back may have the greatest ripple effect on John Schneider and company. We're going to break it all down coming up next here on our Tuesday edition, Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, for our Tuesday episode. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're down in Salem, Oregon, or you are tuning in from St. Louis, Missouri. We greatly appreciate making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week and helping Locked On Podcast Network become the #1 sports podcast network. We are inside 10 days until free agency, 6 days until the legal tampering period. Free agency going to be upon us before you know it. A lot of the moves already being done behind the scenes. Some major chess games going on, particularly for the Seahawks at the running back position. We're going to have the latest on Ken Walker III, how one move elsewhere in the league may have made it even more difficult for the Seahawks to bring back the Super Bowl MVP. And then we've got our first dueling mock draft of the 2026 offseason. Rob and I are going to dish out our 4-pick. Yeah, that's all the Seahawks have right now. 4-pick mock with our selections, and we're going to criticize and compliment and all kinds of fun stuff with those selections. A lot of analysis coming your way, courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with the college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The franchise tag deadline in the NFL has come and gone. The Seahawks, as John Schneider's pretty much done his entire tenure, did not use their tag specifically on Ken Walker III. However, there was more news on that front that is going to impact Seattle trying to bring back Ken Walker III. And it was in New York, the Jets placing the exclusive franchise tag on running back Breece Hall, the other top running back expected to potentially hit the market. And Rob, that from the sources I've talked to with a couple teams that are looking at making a run at Ken Walker III, really probably sets the sweet spot for what K9 is going to be getting offered, maybe even a little more than that $14.2 million on the franchise tag, because Breece Hall is now no longer available. Ken Walker is clearly the class now of this running back class. That price tag likely going to be way too expensive for John Schneider and company to bring back the Super Bowl MVP. So you can say this is the first domino that really falls that makes it that K9 isn't coming back to Seattle, most likely.
Most likely. I think that there is still a chance, of course, that Kenneth Walker III is going to recognize the fact that there is no team that is going to give him a better opportunity to win a Super Bowl than the team of which he of course, was drafted, that he was a Super Bowl MVP. He knows the offense inside and out. And with Zach Charbonnet injured, Kenneth Walker III, for the very first time, at least entering a season, would be the unquestioned #1 running back, have an opportunity to perhaps have a splashy season if he were looking for perhaps maybe just a 1-year type of a prove-it deal. Now, at the same time, we're talking about a running back who does have an opportunity here to get generational wealth. We talked about the likelihood that Kenneth Walker III was going to get to free agency. And if he did get to free agency, then there was going to be, just open bids from multiple different teams that were likely going to price him out of what John Schneider was likely to give him. We have seen the Seahawks be a little bit hesitant to give running backs second NFL contracts. They've done it at times, but I just think that that very few teams are willing to do that. And John Schneider has gone kind of the old school route when it comes to running back. So yeah, Corbin, as you mentioned, with Breece Hall getting the franchise tag from the New York Jets, he is clearly the class of the position now, whether it be in the in free agency, the NFL draft. Basically, there is one player, Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love, who is likely almost surely to be off the board within the top 10. So if you are an NFL team who is looking for immediate bang for your buck at the running back position, then you're going to throw an awful lot of money at Kenneth Walker III. And, you know, if you were operating an NFL team and you have a fan base eager for some excitement, I mean, who better to bring in than the reigning Super Bowl MVP? So, yeah, I do think that the Kenneth Walker III, unfortunately, is very likely has played his last game as a member of the Seattle Seahawks.
Speaking with a couple of my buddies that covered the Jets, and this news has been reported as well, but New York was hoping to use the transition tag on Breece Hall, which would have been about $11.2 million. The difference there is if a team ends up signing him to an offer sheet that's beyond what the Jets are willing to pay, the Jets don't get a compensatory pick back in return. Whereas a franchise tag, you are going to get a compensatory pick back in that instance. You still get a chance to match, but transition tags carry more risk. And if you end up losing that roll of the dice, you lose the player and you don't get any compensation back in return. So the Jets made sure to prevent that. And with that, it really lifts the ceiling. And I would even argue the floor based on the discussions I've been hearing. It, to me, sounds like $12 million might not even be a bargain anymore for Ken Walker III because of Breece Hall being off the market and the fact that he's going to be due $14.2 million on that franchise tag in New York. Teams are going to be throwing money at K9 with him still only being 25 years old. My understanding is John Schneider and the Seahawks, 10 million, maybe 10.5 million is where they would be drawing the line. So this does not seem like this would be a situation unless Walker decides to take less to come back to Seattle. This just does not seem like a situation where the two sides are going to be anywhere close, especially with what other teams are likely to throw money-wise. Houston's a team that I'm expecting is going to be right at the top of that in terms of how much they're going to spend. They need running back help. They have the money to be able to spend at that position. There's going to be other teams as well. With that being said, if K9 is going to be leaving, if Walker's not going to be brought back, John Schneider and company, as always, they are ready to pivot. They've already got their blueprint for what they're going to do if they are replacing Ken Walker III, especially with Zach Charbonnet being hurt. And the two backs that I have been told that they are monitoring closely would fit more with Zach Charbonnet's running style. Tyler Algier from the Atlanta Falcons, who had a 1,000-yard season his rookie year, has not since with Bijan Robinson being ahead of him, but it is a very talented back in his own right, can make guys miss, can break tackles, has been productive in short yardage situations. That one makes sense. And Brian Robinson Jr., who played last year for San Francisco, Brian Fleury was the run game coordinator for the 49ers. Now he's the offensive coordinator in Seattle. He likes Brian Robinson a lot. There would be the carryover playing in his offense in Seattle. And Robinson at nearly 230 pounds, another more downhill style back, but he can run the zone stuff. And he did it really well for San Francisco, mixing in with Christian McCaffrey last year. One or both of those guys could be targets here for less money than what the Seahawks would have to pay to re-sign Ken Walker III. So those are two names to keep a very close eye on here.
Yeah, and I think that both of them would make an awful lot of sense. I mean, these are bigger, more physical backs than Kenneth Walker III. They are more of those kind of downhill sledgehammer types that neither one of them possess the 4.3 speed breakaway ability that Kenneth Walker III possesses. But at the same time, they are more decisive. There's no question about it. Look, I mean, Ken Walker III in the Super Bowl, of course, we saw just how dynamic he can be. And the announcers were quite complimentary of him. There's some comparisons to Le'Veon Bell and his patience. That patience that Ken Walker III demonstrated in the Super Bowl has also been something that has been maddening at times for the Seahawks coaches and frankly, the fan base as well. And so, look, I think that Ken Walker III would be a wonderful, it'd be wonderful from a Seattle perspective if he were to return to the Seahawks. So I'm not going to, be throwing dirt on his grave in terms of Seahawks right now. But at the same time, I think this woe is me. How are the Seahawks possibly going to compete if number 9 is not toting the rock for Seattle in 2026 is kind of laughable, to be honest with you. That's why I've always struggled with the idea of paying him more than, say, $10 to $11 million. The $11 million per average that Kyron Williams, the Los Angeles Rams, got a year ago, Corbin, has always kind of been the ceiling that I was thinking about with Ken Walker. I recognize the impact that he had. I think you could make an argument that maybe some of the victories the Seattle had this past year wouldn't have been victories without K9. But at the same time, if you put in a quality back, and I believe that Brian Robinson Jr. and Tyler Argio certainly are talented backs, that Seattle would have won the Super Bowl. They still would have been very productive just because they are dynamic pass receivers. They are better in pass protection than Kenneth Walker. They've proven to be more durable than Kenneth Walker. Seattle is going to be just fine. This is one of the position groups that John Schneider has, had more hits than misses. And while everybody again is saying, "Oh, there's no running backs in this draft class," there are plenty of talented backs in this class. The Seahawks are going to be just fine.
And I would also mention this for anybody that's questioning, well, why Seattle only looking at these bigger bruising type backs? George Holani compares more to Ken Walker III than Zach Charbonnet. And I think Seattle's looking, and Kenny McIntosh is kind of that slithery back that's a little bit of a mix of the two. So Seattle's got in-house options that they feel can compete for snaps as well that have different skill sets. So they could bring in 1 or 2 battering rams to help replace Zach Charbonnet to go with what they have. And you could have a pretty good collection of backs. And that's without considering what's available in the draft. So John Schneider, he's got options. We'll have to see which ones he ends up going with if Ken Walker III is not going to be back in 2026 and beyond. Coming up next, everyone rejoice. It's time for our first dueling mock draft here on Locked On Seahawks for the offseason post-combine edition. Rob and I are going to skip the trades on this one. There's 4 picks. We're going to be looking at Seattle's first and second round selections on our mock drafts coming up next here on our Tuesday edition, Locked On Seahawks. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. You live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club to get Locked On Seahawks with no interruptions, members-only Discord access to speak with Locked On hosts, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. And with free agency being here, get 1 month free of the Everydayer Club with the code FREE AGENCY, no spaces, now through March 15th. Go ad-free and keep this conversation going on Discord by joining the club at lockedonseahawks.supercast.com. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more. It's officially mock draft season, and we've got the free agent period coming up. So there will be a little bit of a hiatus in our draft talk coming up as we dish out all of our insight on Seattle signings, the players that leave, and obviously that's going to impact what they do in the upcoming draft. But, Rob, we like to take these things in incremental steps, and we just had the combine in Indianapolis, a little bit more information for us to work with. So we decided it was time to dish out our first dueling mock drafts of the 2026 offseason. And a little bit different than the past. Last year, Seattle felt like it had 800 draft picks. So when we did these dueling mock drafts, it was like, okay, we got to quickly go through every single pick. And this year, Seattle currently only has 4 picks. Now, I'd be stunned if they don't pick at least 5 or 6 times in April. However, they currently have 4. And we're not going to make any trades because this is our first mock draft that we've done in the show. You and I, using Seattle's 4 picks, going to start at pick number 32. And this is a fascinating one, Rob, because you and I have talked about a few positions that could be in play here at number 32. And I think you and I were on the same tangent in terms of where the Seahawks should go with that first round selection.
Well, it just would make an awful lot of sense for Seattle to take advantage of one of the true strengths of this draft class and fill an area of concern for the club, and that being that edge rusher role. Boye Mafe, of course, is a free agent. Uchenna Nwosu is due a massive salary increase this upcoming season. There has been some talk that DeMarcus Lawrence may be mulling retirement. So again, multiple reasons why Seattle might be considering an edge rusher with one of their first selections. I think that edge rusher, again, is a real strength of this class. I just released my top 50 prospects for the 2026 NFL draft, and 10 of the 50 would play the defensive end / outside linebacker role that we have seen Mike Macdonald use to such great effectiveness, and Seattle obviously winning the Super Bowl. So I think that, again, it would make an awful lot of sense. If not Seattle's first selection, currently number 32, or their second selection, currently number 64. If the Seahawks don't use one of these picks on an edge rusher, Corbin, I would be stunned. Just because, again, it just makes so much sense here. So the player that I'm going to roll with here is Gabe Apiece, the edge rusher from Illinois, 6'4", 260 pounds. He's got 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands, and I absolutely love his game and the way that it fits in Mike Macdonald's defense. This is a guy who is equally effective out of the 3-point stance, so his hand is in the dirt, or 2-point stance when he's rushing upfield as a stand-up outside linebacker. This is a former state champion wrestler in the state of Florida, was recruited, of course, by Brett Bielema at Illinois, led the Big Ten in sacks this past season. He uses his hands incredibly well. He is very physical at the point of attack in terms of run defense as well. I like the instincts. I like the nastiness. I like the fact that he was voted a team captain this past season. There's just so many things about his game that I think are just a hand-in-glove fit to the Seahawks. I know that he is not being viewed as a first-round prospect by some out there in the draft community. He's my number 30 overall ranked prospect. If he were available, the Seahawks at number 32, mail it in. He should be their selection.
Yeah, and I went with the same position group. I'm going with a player that was a bit of a late bloomer in Zion Young. And you look at his first 2 years in Michigan State, didn't have much sack production, wasn't overly effective rushing the passer. Goes to Missouri. The sack numbers were still not there his first season, but had an uptick in pressure rate, more quarterback hits, and then everything came together this year for the Tigers. 6.5 sacks, had nearly 17 tackles for loss. College football does partial tackles for loss, which the NFL does not. 16.5 on the stat sheet, and 260 plus pounds, has plenty of length. Zion Young is a physical edge setter. He plays the game with the toughness and the mentality that Mike Macdonald was looking for off the edge. Now, he had a DWI in December, so teams are going to need to be asking about that. I'm sure that was a big focal point at the Combine this week. Didn't have any other red flags in terms of off the field before that. He made a mistake. I don't know that the Seahawks would take him off their draft board for just that. But this is a guy that brings the physicality, the mindset, the toughness, and he's got a budding pass rush repertoire. That was the biggest issue, is he really was just a bull rusher the first few years of his college career. He started to add some counters and find success getting to QBs this year in the SEC. I think Zion Young's best football is still in front of him. So that is a guy with his size and his skill set that can play 2-point stance, 3-point stance, that I think would be a really good fit in Mike Macdonald's defense and help make up for Boye Mafe and maybe even DeMarcus Lawrence leaving. This is a position I think that is a big one to get replenished in the draft, particularly early. Young would be a nice fit there. Going to pick number 64 against Seattle. You win the Super Bowl, this is what you get as a reward, the last pick in each round. And this could be a draft where the pickings start to get thin already by the time you get to the end of the second round, start going into round 3, at least at certain positions. But one spot that is not the case is the cornerback position, which again, you and I, we don't meet up before we do these shows. We do our drafts and we just happen to pick the same position again at pick 64.
Yeah, and again, this is another positional group that I think is a relative strength of this year's class. Of the 50 aforementioned players on that article, I have 7 cornerbacks. I'm actually going with a corner that I do not have on my top 50. He would be number 51. And so, again, I think that there is a possibility that he is not available to the Seahawks. But if Keith Abney II from Arizona State is available, I do think that he would make an awful lot of sense for the Seahawks. Now, we've talked, of course, a lot about the fact that Seattle has free agents in Tariq Woolen, in Josh Jobe. In particular, they've got a very young player, Nehemiah Pritchett. He's young in terms of age. He's young in terms of experience, but there's just not a lot of starting experience behind your superstar in Devin Witherspoon. And Devin Witherspoon, I mentioned not only because of the role that he plays for the Seahawks, the fact that I presume that Seattle is going to be looking to extend his contract as well, but also because of the fact that he is pretty small at the cornerback position. And that, to me, would be one of the only knocks that people should have with Abney. He's 5'10", he's 187 pounds, he's got 30-inch arms. He probably would have been just crossed off of Pete Carroll's list, but I think that he plays with the scrappiness, the instincts, the ball skills that the Seahawks have prioritized. He's absolutely one of the better run defending corners in this draft class. He's a clean open field tackler. He is a highly aggressive player. He left ASU after his junior season, has been a standout all 3 years, 8 total turnovers created in 3 seasons at ASU, including 2 forced fumbles this past year. Corbin, I think that if the Seahawks are going to be taking a cornerback that they think is going to compete for immediate playing time, then it's going to have to be a guy who's wired right. And so that's where I think the Abney, once you get past the top 4 or 5 corners that are going to be shoe-in first round selections, if you're going to be waiting until the second round, you've got to get a guy who has more fight in the dog rather than, more, dog in the fight kind of a mentality. I mean, just a junkyard dog kind of mentality than worrying about height and weight, size, speed kind of things. Abney did not work out at the combine. That's important to note here. And I am fascinated to see where he works out. I think that he's going to be in the high 4.4s, low 4.5 kind of things, not necessarily the 4.3s of some of the other more dynamic athletes of this class. But pound for pound, to me, he is one of the absolute best corners. I think that he is a long-time NFL starter in the future.
And I feel the same way about D'Angelo Pons from the national championship Indiana Hoosiers. And again, Pete Carroll would have been marking him off of his list because he's small. I mean, he makes Abney look like Yao Ming. He's short. He's not very big. But listen, you turn on Indiana tape, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I've mentioned a number of other Indiana players. I don't know, and this includes Fernando Mendoza. I don't know that there was a guy that my eyes gravitated to more watching the Indiana Hoosiers play than D'Angelo Pons. I just love the infectious energy that he plays with. You can tell he loves the game. He reminds me a lot of Devin Witherspoon. He's not the same player, but he's physical. He will come up and he will hit you. He hits like he's 200 pounds. He's a guy that really plays above his weight class. He's got really good ball skills. And oh, by the way, I don't care if he's 5'8" or 5'9". He almost jumped out of Lucas Oil Stadium the other day. This guy's got hops, so he can compensate for that size with his jumping ability. He's really good against contested catches. He gets his hands in the football. He's got touchdown capabilities when he gets the ball in his hands. D'Angelo Pons, to me, is one of the more complete corners in this draft class. And the only thing that's holding him back is the size. I don't think Mike Macdonald cares about that. Mike Macdonald wants physical football players that play the game the right way and have a high football IQ that can move around. This guy can play in the slot. He can play the boundary. He can play safety in a pinch. D'Angelo Pond screams Seattle Seahawks. So I went with him at pick number 64. When we come back, we've got two more draft selections in our dueling mocks. Number 96 coming up in round 3. And then we have one day 3 pick that we'll be discussing. That's coming up next to your on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners, this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. College basketball is nonstop. You've got big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want to. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, Big Ten tournament, SEC tournament. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with your team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside to it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. We are in the middle of our first dueling mock draft of the 2026 offseason. And some are going to say, well, Rob, Corbin, you guys only had 4 picks to make in this mock draft. You guys are slacking. Well, we didn't have trades. Our next one, we will add some trades into the mix because, again, I'll be very surprised if John Schneider doesn't make at least 5 or 6 picks in this draft. That's the way that he operates. We'll see what happens when we get to that point. But for now, this being our first dueling mock draft, we just did Seattle's 4 native picks they have going into this draft. And Rob, the first 2 picks, you and I were on the same page. We both picked the same positions. That's going to change here with these last 2 picks. And the player that you went with, pick number 96, end of the 3rd round, going with a athletic, big-bodied receiver. I know that a lot of people out there may be wondering why receiver is high on the board, but you and I have talked about it a lot, especially if Rashid Shaheed leaves. We found out today Jake Bobo's not getting tendered, which I was expecting. I've been told they still want to bring him back just at a cheaper price. I mean, there's going to be some turnover potentially, that receiver group, and this is a very good receiver class to be able to add to that talent in day 2.
It's a good enough receiver class, Corbin, that I strongly considered a wideout at number 32 overall, and certainly at number 64 overall. I mean, let's face it. Obviously, when you have the NFL's Offensive Player of the Year in Jackson Smith-Njigba, you're feeling really good about that. But Cooper Kupp has proven himself to be injury prone. Obviously, Torrey Horton has proven himself to be injury prone. And look, with all due respect to Jake Bobo or to Cody White or even the free agent that is Derek Young, et cetera, I don't think that bringing any of those players back or not is going to dramatically dramatically change Seattle's plan at the receiver position. As you mentioned, certainly if Rashid Shaheed is brought back, then wide receiver is a lesser concern. But if they do not, or bring in somebody else who's a starting caliber receiver in free agency, then I absolutely believe that wideout is going to be a position of focus for the Seahawks. And if they do only stick with the 4 picks, one of them will be a wide receiver, in my opinion. You also mentioned the fact that, again, we only had the 4 picks in this particular mock draft. Mike McDonald said it himself at the combine for all to hear, that basically they expect to have more draft picks. So it does look like John Schneider is going to be looking to wheel and deal. But for the purposes of this mock draft, let's just stick with the 2 remaining selections here for the Seahawks. And so at number 96 overall, the last pick of the native 3rd round, without using any compensatory picks, I have the Seahawks going with a former Washington State Cougar, a former Ohio State Cowboy, a former Ole Miss Rebel, Dejon Stribling, 6'2", 207-pound wide receiver who not only has the size to play that outside perimeter role that the Seahawks, frankly, I think could use, but also has that elite straight line speed. Came in at 4.36 seconds in the 40-yard dash. That includes a 1.53 10-yard split, which is among the top 10, fastest 10-yard splits of any player at this year's draft class. 36-inch vertical, 10'7" broad jump. Corbin, what I like about him is that regardless of where he played, he was highly productive. He scored 5 touchdowns as a true freshman at Washington State. This is a Hawaiian native whose father is a member of the Marines. This is a no sir, yes ma'am type of a guy. I love his straight line speed and size combination, as I mentioned before. I like the physicality as a run blocker. I like the long arms and the strong hands to pull in catches that are outside of his frame. I just think that this is a quality number 2 wide receiver in the NFL that you might be able to get at a little bit of a discount because of the fact that he did bounce around a little bit. And there are so many guys out there that maybe are a little flashier in some ways. I think that he had fit in perfectly in Seattle's offense.
Yeah, he's a player that I actually considered with my mock draft at this position. But at the end of the day, I could not resist a player falling to the end of the 3rd round. And I don't know if Jalen Kilgore is going to fall this far. However, this is a very deep secondary class. So there's going to be some good players that fall into the 2nd and into the 3rd round. Jalen Kilgore's played some boundary and slot corner. He, to me, is going to be a safety that can play both the strong and free safety positions. And he's coming from South Carolina, where Nick Emmanwori was his teammate for 2 years. So you would have that built-in relationship. Now, Kilgore's not quite the same style player. He's 6'1", a little over 200 pounds. So he's more of a normally built defensive back compared to Emmanwori, but he's still got size. He's still got strength, and he's got really good ball skills. This is a guy that's got a couple of pick sixes in his career at South Carolina. He loves to come up and hit people. He's a willing tackler, a great teammate, was a team captain this year. And again, that relationship that he has with Nick Emmanwori, these 2 guys have already played a lot of snaps together. He can play in the slot. He can play both safety positions. I think he's more natural at that free safety spot than Nick Emmanwori is. So if you lose Kobe Bryant, which I think there's a chance they could, Jalen Kilgore could jump right into the lineup and certainly would have to beat out Tyakata for that. But I think Jalen Kilgore could come in and start for the Seahawks early, and then you'd have him and Nick Emmanwori under contract for the next 3 years together. Continuity going from college to the NFL. I just love him as a playmaker. I love the kid in terms of his character. I think he would be an excellent fit to put into Mike McDonald's defense. One more selection here. We have to wait all the way to 187. If we were covering the real draft, Rob, I think you and I could drive to Tacoma and back before the next pick. Oh, maybe not with the traffic, but it's going to be a big gap that you would expect they're going to try to close a little bit with a trade down at some point. But selecting at 187, a lot of talent has come off the board, but this is where the Seahawks have made their money over the years. John Schneider has a tendency to find quality players at this stage of the draft. What direction did you go with Seattle's 4th and final selection?
Well, Corbin, we lit off today's show talking about running backs, and I think that if Seattle brings Kenneth Walker the third back or brings in another veteran, a Tyler Algier or Brian Robinson are among the candidates, I think that would make an awful lot of sense for a variety of different reasons. Then maybe they do go with the safety. As you mentioned, I think that that is a position of concern. But as it stands right now, I think that running back has got to be a position that Seattle would strongly consider at this point. Of course, some of Seattle's splashiest selections at running backs have been second rounders. Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker the third. But remember, Chris Carson was a seventh round selection. Obviously, he had a terrific, campaign, terrific career with the Seahawks as well. If somehow Jonah Coleman from Washington is still on the board, Corbin, I see a back that maybe isn't an elite starter in the NFL, but he is going to be a damn good NFL back. He's 5'8", 220 pounds. He is built like a Sherman tank. I mean, he's difficult to knock off of his feet. I think the only reason that he might be available here is just because he is coming off of a PCL injury that kept him out of the Senior Bowl, kept him out of participating in anything but the bench press at the combine. And frankly, I don't see a guy who is going to put up a dynamic 40-yard dash time. I'm expecting something in the mid 4.5s. And so again, when you have a kind of a stubby back that doesn't necessarily have those elite traits that suggest that he is going to be a starter, I think that there's going to be a lot of NFL teams that are going to be taking advantage of this year's terrific depth along the offensive line, the defensive line, corner, safety, receiver, etc., and allow a player like Coleman to fall down the board. I like his instincts. I like his physicality in pass protection, as well as just his ability to push off defenders who are trying to tackle him and keep his pad level low and bury his way through would-be tacklers. He's a terrific receiver out of the backfield. In fact, that's where he began his football career, was as a wide receiver. You see the natural hands unit that UW and previously Arizona, in my opinion, didn't use him often enough in that regard, and he still had 87 catches over his career. But I think that he could actually do more things as a receiver with Jonah Coleman than Seattle ever did with Kenneth Walker III. So again, he has limited, albeit limited, but he does have kickoff return experience as well. This is all of the players I've mentioned are 4-year. Well, excuse me. Abney was a 3-year contributor, but all of them have proven very durable throughout their college careers. All of them were team captains or otherwise have been highly regarded by the coaching staffs. Again, this is another player that shouldn't be available in the 6th round, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does fall into the mid-day 3. And I think that Seattle would highly prioritize a back like Jonah Coleman.
And I'm going to go with a player who, if he was a little younger and hadn't bounced around so much at the college level, Keegan Trost, who finished his college career at Missouri, he is as fluid of a zone blocking tackle as you are going to find in this draft class. He is light on his feet. He's got some ability to finish. His hand placement can be a little bit iffy, but also was really good in pass protection for Missouri this year. But a player that has bounced around, was at Indiana State for a few years, ended up finding his way to Missouri. He's going to be 25 during his rookie season. And I think a player like that, especially with the talent in this tackle class, you mentioned yesterday, there could be 7 tackles that go in the first round alone. If he was in a different draft class, probably goes earlier. But you add in the depth of this class, his age, this is a guy that has enough talent to start potentially at some point in the NFL. But I could see him going middle to late day 3 because of the factors that I mentioned. But in terms of fit in this zone-centric scheme, Keegan Trost is a player that I love with his athleticism. He's got that dancing bear skill set, and he's experienced. He's been in the college level longer than Van Wilder, so he's been around for a while. But he is a player that I think you could plug in with Josh Jones likely to leave in free agency. He's a guy that you could plug in immediately to compete with Mason Richmond for that swing tackle job, and Amari Kite being in there as well. And I would give him the edge over those two coming in and having a chance to be the swing tackle behind Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. Really has the athleticism and the zone blocking chops, a little bit of nastiness to his game too, that at this stage could be a real value pick at 187 overall. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. We are heading into free agency. Make sure to check out the Everydayer Club with the code free agency. No spaces now through March 15th to get your first month of the Everydayer Club for Locked On Seahawks free. And let's keep this conversation going on Discord. Check it out at lockedonseahawks.supercast.com. When we come back tomorrow, Rob, we are going to be diving deeper into free agency and maybe having some questions about outside free agents that the Seahawks could or should potentially target away from the running back position. We're going to be breaking it all down coming up tomorrow. Make sure to listen and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.